Good afternoon. It is 4/29/2020, and me, Peter Travisano, and Jonathan Ostrow are here to talk about Dubliners and In the Name of the Father, written slash directed by two Irish people who are actually very influential to the 20th century's writing and artistic creativity. Dan Sheridan and James Joyce, they have a lot in common with each other that I find intriguing. First of all, they're both Irish, of course. But second of all, they both lead their protagonist into a situation where they have to make a choice based on past evidence and future inferences. And the difference between James Joyce and Sheridan is that in James Joyce's short stories, it's pretty evident that they never really follow their decisions through fruition. While I think Dan Sheridan's piece is kind of what would have happened if one of these short stories actually would have followed through. And I think that's a great thing because I definitely think Dan Sheridan had read a lot of James Joyce in his age, and he gets a lot of like um, components to the main characters. Like Jerry is very similar to the boy from the the encounter, and you could see a very similar thing to the hermit in the name of the Father, and the Josser queer from an encounter. And
I
Osh,
mean,
what happened in Evelyn?
so with the decisions they made, you said that the movie is basically what would have happened. I just think that since these are short stories, it's kind of like the point to cut it off to like kind of let the reader kind of like think about it. But whereas a movie, like an hour and a half, 2 hour, 2.5 even hour movie, you can't really cut it off, right? So in the short story in Evelyn, she's left with the decision at the end to stay with her abusive father or go off to, I believe it was Costa Rica with her boyfriend. Um, in the encounter, the boys were left with the decision to go to the pigeon house. That's what it's called, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Pigeon house. In Araby, the boy was left with the decision to uh go talk to that girl and see what was up instead of like hiding behind blinds, as they would say. In the book, like you even saw like he'd like kind of peek at her through the blinds and like talk all this talk, but he never really walked the walk. Like he said, like, oh, I was in love with her the moment I saw her, but he never even talked to her.
Yeah.
um, if you want to elaborate on the decision in the movie.
I mean, it's interesting how we talk about Dan Sheridan's directing. Well, I just talked about it, but it's how we talk about it like it is a James Joyce short story. While, it is a very true story. A lot of the events that happened are true,
Well,
especially the event of actual Jerry going to Britain because his father wanted him to get out of the IRA's troubles. And,
as you said before, why they're similar. I'm sure he read a lot of Joyce's
yeah, it's
work, but
it's like it's like interesting to me because it's so evident that he got this one scene where he's Jerry's going on the cruise, and his father's with him and all this, and Jerry even says like father always had a great anecdote for any situation, and
yeah,
it's exactly like James Joyce's writing. Like they would, after they had either after they had not made their decision or made their decision to not do it, they said something always, like we had just run out of time. The day had passed us um with such
the quickness. It was
haste.
the one.
I forget what it said actually in the encounter, but Yeah, I think you can interpret um, the like I said, the hermit from the encounter,
Mhm.
who was like a really creepy, sleazy guy,
Yeah.
as the hermit from uh, In the Name of the Father, because the only difference is like Jerry is very outgoing, and so is the boy from the encounter and his friend, and they talk to this guy, and so does Jerry. It's like if they were to make a scene of just that scene of the encounter, I feel like they'd line up pretty perfectly together.
Mhm.
They have
Yeah.
a lot of the same, even like
I mean, you can also make the argument as um Jerry and his father kind of being similar to Evelyn and her father, whereas Jerry is kind of similar to Evelyn's father, as if they're both rebellious. They both, well, Evelyn's father obviously, as we know, like abused Evelyn and like did all that, but like I'm saying, they were kind of the bad guys of the
yeah,
uh, film and the short story, whereas Evelyn and Jerry's father were kind of like the peacemakers. Um,
they're the moral code of the whole story.
like,
Their morals stay like this the whole story.
uh,
And with the with Jerry, at least I didn't read Evelyn, but with Jerry, his moral code goes like this. It goes down and up and down. It's mostly like this though at the beginning, and then he does something good, and then he does something real good, and then he's just somehow some sort of god. But
I also have another connection between the short story and the movie. How when they accused Jerry, it was kind of like uh, the British government kind of being racist towards him since he was Irish. Whereas I found this kind of like similar in the encounter. If you remember in the beginning of the short story, the I forgot his name. It was the old man, like the butler or something. He caught the boy with a magazine of some sort, and he was
oh, you're
like,
talking about the priest.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And he was like, what are you doing with that magazine? You know, only Protestants read it. Not a Catholic boy like you should be reading this. And even later on, when the kids were walking around, um, they saw those little homeless kids. Do you remember those? It described them as like dirty little homeless kids or something. And they were screaming across them. They were throwing rocks at them. They were like, "Oh, you dirty Protestants," because they mistaken the boys as Protestants, whereas they were Catholic. But like you just see that divide between the Protestants and the Catholics, whereas in the movie you kind of see the divide between the British government and the Irish government.
Yeah, I mean, this is all historically based things. I mean, again, a lot of it comes from Britain actually taking Ireland's first spot. I mean, the Irish were there first, and a lot of the Irish were just like, "All right, we'll move," but then the British want more. They just continued to. I'm on the Irish side. I got to be honest. I feel like the Irish should have just been allowed to stay, and then the British move over to that island. I mean, they had all the stuff they wanted there, but the British are pretty known for conquering. I mean, we look at New Zealand, Australia, India, America at first, but we got away with it. Newfoundland, Canada. Um, you know, they're just pretty much known for that, and I think that's why the Irish are so proud, is because they did stand up to it, even though they did end up moving. They didn't allow them to take anything else. They didn't allow them to take their rights. They didn't allow them to take their wealth. They're, they didn't allow them to even like live among them. The Irish are a very closed society, as you know. And um,
I actually have a question about the movie. I have my answer, but I'll hear your answer first, and then I'll share my answer. My question was, do you think that Jerry deserved to be in jail, even though he was an innocent man, even though he didn't commit that the terrorist act? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, he obviously was a troubled kid, but I don't think anyone who is innocent deserves to be in jail for 15 years, especially in a jail not of their not of their nation.
Yeah.
Like I feel like they should have taken him back to Irish prison, but honestly, it's impossible to get a good trial or a jury for such a matter like this because it's so socially charged and especially in I mean British court system, they actually do not choose a non-biased court. Not only because it's so difficult, because Britain's much smaller than America. We can choose a non-biased court pretty easily for most cases.
You're, so you're saying that he doesn't deserve to be in jail?
No, he definitely didn't deserve to be in jail.
I think it was uh kind of like a waking up call for him because in the beginning he was like a rebel, he was a troublemaker. He even stole money. He stole $600. Um and then he was framed obviously for committing this terrorist attack, and when he was in there, I feel like he kind of realized like, all right, like I've been bad, I've been a bad member of society. I need to kind of step it up, step my morals straight. um and then he ends up ironically, uh there was a scene where the British police officer or British person was like on fire, correct me if I'm wrong, and he set out the fire and essentially saved that man. And it's kind of ironic how in the beginning he was a rebel and hated them, and at the end he saves a British guy's life.
Well, yeah, the more ironic part about that is that the uh, person who lit the prison guard on fire was the most rebellious person you can get. I mean, he's for the Irish Army, he's in the IRA, and he was the person who actually, he committed the bombing.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jerry thought that was awesome. Jerry was like, well, I hate the British just as much as anyone. I'm totally on your side. And the father, of course, before he saw right through the IRA guy. He knew he was a bad guy. You can't kill a bunch of people without being a bad person.
No.
And Jerry didn't see that. So, 5, 10 years goes by, and he realizes that, oh shit, this guy's bad. I'm not going to be on this guy's team anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that was the wake up call for Jerry. I don't
Yeah.
think prison was the wake up call for Jerry. I know if I were in that situation and my father went in with me, I'd be with my father all day. Like I would not leave his sight.
Yeah. I mean,
But
it's scary because, as you said before, there are two Irishmen in a British prison.
yeah,
Like, that's just not, something that is gonna like make something good at. You know what I mean? Like, that's basically putting, like, I don't know how to word it, but basically like starting trouble.
yeah,
It's like throwing a flame on newspaper and expecting it not to like light up. Like, it's the same situation as if like they're enemies at this time, as you would say. And I mean, so, but other than that, do you have any other thoughts?
Oh, I mean, I could talk about this movie forever. I thought it was like an insane movie, and it left a really big footprint on my mind. And I still am kind of like thinking about it, just like
Mhm.
it was insane. But um, we could talk about. Uh, we could talk about um was Jerry actually a bad person? Because like as he said in the recording that he sent to the lawyer, like I just wanted free love and dope. And beside robbing that woman, he really was just like trying to live a new life, like with his friends, peacefully.
Well, it's funny you brought that up because I actually just remembered this. Um, do you remember how in Araby they described the house and like outside of the house, the neighborhood. It was, I believe they used the word like lonesome, dark. I remember it was a one-way street. It was a cul-de-sac, so not much went in, not much went out. There was only one way, right? Basically, it was a one-way street. And when you look at Jerry, he's kind of in the same situation as his mind is a one-way street. He is from Ireland, so he's like, all right, I'm team Irish, I'm from Ireland, I got to protect my people. So he automatically doesn't like the British government, Britain, period. And I just think it's as we said earlier, it's ironic how he ended up, saving that British guy's life, even though, he hates the British. But I just thought of that, how those two kind of connected, that one way street on Araby, how everyone in there was kind of like just living the days like day by day, like they didn't really care what happened. They would just do the same thing over and over again. And same thing with his mindset is like, all right, I'm from Ireland, I don't like the British.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how we think just it's just between British and Irish, but then you remember like the father's name is Giuseppe. So
Yeah.
he's like he's Italian, but he's not Italian. He's full Irish.
Mhm.
And it's just kind of like he's the middleman. He's always going to be that guy who tries to be completely morally right. And Italy wasn't always the most morally correct place. But in the 70s and 80s, they really were just trying to be morally correct.
Yeah.
And, you know,
You
it's
know who
like,
you know who Jerry kind of reminds me of? Like a
oh,
little bit like Aladdin. I don't know
I can
why.
see that.
Kind of like rebellious, and then the genie is more of like his father, where like he just obeys his orders and does what he does. Like he has like, all right, the genie's like, all right, I have to obey like the person that rubs the lamp, and that's that, whoever it is. Like,
Well,
and
it's kind of like a Robin Hood thing, you know. I
yeah,
mean, there's always gonna be that Robin Hood like, uh, what's that? Like a trope,
uh,
and Aladdin has that Robin Hood trope, but it's more selfish. And
yeah,
they always go through the journey of it, and then they finally, by the end, are just like,
yeah. I mean, yeah, I see Jerry and Aladdin being very similar, as if like Aladdin was pissed off that he lived the life that he did. He was a poor, alone kid by himself, while there was others like the princess, living in high standards, getting served food, whatever. Same with Jerry. He was an Irishman, and he didn't like the Britons. Period.
well, that's all we got for today. Thank you, Ostrow, for doing this with me. Mr. Gross, your class was dope.
Loved it. I'm gonna remember it for the rest of my life for sure.
I'm gonna miss you, man.